Hey everyone, Aaron here from Minor Illusion, and we're talking today about perception checks and investigation checks, what they are, how they differ, when to use each one of them, but also how they are often misused.
I want to move up to the door and I want to listen for any movement or sound.
On the other side of the door?
Yeah.
Okay, make a perception check.
15.
Okay.
I want to scan the room to see if there's anything different from the last time I was here.
Okay, make a perception check.
2.
Yikes.
Do I smell smoke like there might be a campfire nearby?
Make a perception check.
6. I'd like to search the wall to see if there's a secret door.
Okay, how are you doing that?
I want to feel along it to see if there's any difference between something in the wall.
Okay, so you're feeling for where a door might be, a seam or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, make an investigation check.
5.
5. Yee.
Before I open the door, I want to check for traps.
Okay, you're checking for traps on the drawer itself.
Yes.
Okay, make an investigation check.
19.
Ooh, okay. In the examples that you just saw, I'm willing to bet that most of you didn't bat an eye at the skill checks that I called for. Perception checks tend to be used for broad situational awareness types of checks, while investigation checks tend to be used for more hands-on, up close, looking for hidden things, secret doors, traps, concealed portals, those types of things. However, I want to suggest that there is a better way of using and differentiating between these two skill checks. And that better way is actually to follow the RAW or the RAI, the rules as written or the rules as intended, which in this case is the exact same thing. And at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, using perception checks and investigation checks the way that I just saw them isn't the way that the rules call for them to be used? It's actually not. And while I'm no fan of just woodenly following the RAW, especially if there's a better way of doing something, in this case, the RAW really is the best way, in my opinion, to use these two skill checks. So what are the rules as written when it comes to perception checks and investigation checks? Well, let's start with perception checks. Concerning this skill check, the player's handbook says this. Your wisdom perception check lets you spot, hear, or otherwise detect the presence of something. It measures your general awareness of your surroundings and the keenness of your senses. For example, you might try to hear a conversation through a closed door, eavesdrop under an open window, or hear monsters moving stealthily in a forest. Or you might try to spot things that are obscured or easy to miss, whether they are orcs lying in ambush on a road, thugs hiding in the shadows of an alley, or candlelight under a closed secret door. Okay, so far it sounds like the usual way of using perception checks is borne out. But what's interesting here is the inset box with the heading Finding a Hidden Object. Listen to what we read in that box. When your character searches for a hidden object, such as a secret door or a trap, the DM typically asks you to make a wisdom perception check. Such a check can be used to find hidden details or other information and clues that you might otherwise overlook. Did you catch that? Secret doors, traps, or any other hidden objects such as a key, a door, a portal, or anything else, searching for those calls for a perception check, not an investigation check. If that surprises you, I can guarantee you that you're not alone. And you might be asking yourself right now, well then when do we use investigation checks? Well, we'll talk about those now, and then we're going to talk about how to capitalize on both of these skill checks. The interplay between these two checks is actually very interesting, and for your players, very fun. For investigation checks, the part of the player's handbook that concerns us says this: when you look around for clues and make deductions based on those clues, you make an intelligence investigation check. You might deduce the location of a hidden object, discern from the appearance of a wound what kind of weapon dealt it, or determine the weakest point in a tunnel that could cause it to collapse. Now, some of this sounds pretty much the same as perception checks, but it's really not. There's a subtle but important difference here between the two skill checks. Investigation checks have to do not only with looking for clues, but also with making deductions about those clues. Remember, investigation checks are intelligence-based, not wisdom-based. The DM guide is helpful here too. There's an inset box on page 238 called Intelligence Checks versus Wisdom Checks. And remember, skill checks like perception checks and investigation checks are types of ability checks like wisdom checks and intelligence checks. In that inset box, we read this: if you have trouble deciding whether to call for an intelligence or a wisdom check to determine whether a character notices something, think of it in terms of what a very high or low score in those two abilities might mean. A character with a high wisdom but low intelligence is aware of the surroundings but is bad at interpreting what things mean. The character might spot that one section of a wall is clean and dusty compared to the others, but he or she wouldn't necessarily make the deductions that a secret door is there. In contrast, a character with high intelligence and low wisdom is probably oblivious but clever. The character might not spot the clean section of wall, but if asked about it, could immediately deduce why it's clean. Wisdom checks allow characters to perceive what is around them, the wall is clean here, while intelligence checks answer why things are that way. There's probably a secret door. So, having considered all this, what is the difference between a perception check and an investigation check? Well, perception checks are sense-based. Sight, hearing, smell, touch, even taste. While investigation checks are thought-based. They have to do with deducing something from what your senses have discovered. An easy way to make this distinction in-game is just to think about Sherlock Holmes. Whether he is making an initial scan of the crime scene from the doorway and he hasn't even entered the room yet, or whether he's moved into the room and he's combing the crime scene for every little clue that he might find, he is using his senses, all 5 of them, to discover those clues. So Mr. Holmes, at that point, should make a perception check. But once he has his clues, and he begins the work of drawing conclusions from those clues, and deducing who did what, and with what, and to whom, at that point, he is using his mind. And so Mr. Holmes then should make an investigation check. This is the intent of the rules concerning perception checks and investigation checks. But from what I can tell, the vast majority of DMs do not use them this way, or at least don't use investigation checks this way. I put out a poll on both Twitter and Facebook before I made this video, and the results show that over 93% of respondents use investigation checks when they really should be using perception checks. Now, on the surface, it might appear that this complicates a simple action like searching for something, but it doesn't have to. As a DM, you don't have to design traps and secret doors and hidden compartments with a view to the players having to do both perception and investigation checks. A secret door might be discovered, for example, on a simple DC 12 perception check, as long as they're looking in the right place. End of story. But on occasion, it can be fun to add some depth by using both of these skill checks together. Maybe a secret door can be found on a DC 12 perception check, but how do you get it open? There's no doorknob, so what kind of mechanism operates the door? Does the door slide open or does it swing open? Does it hinge at the top or on the sides? Does it open inward or outward? Maybe the perception check also revealed some scrapes along the floor and a stone on the wall that seems to be smoother than all the other stones. After that, on a DC 12 investigation check, maybe the players were able to deduce that the stone on the wall is smooth because it has been pushed many times over the years to open this secret door, which happens to swing inward, leaving those scratches along the floor. Thus, the Sherlock Holmes in your party, on a successful perception check, noticed all of these clues, found a faint outline along the wall, found a smooth stone in the wall, and saw scratches along the floor. But then that same Sherlock Holmes, or a different one, on a successful investigation check, put all those clues together and drew the correct conclusion about the nature of this door. Figured out that the stone activates the door. Figured out that the door opens inward, leaving those scratches on the floor. This is the rules as written, and I would add the rules as intended, method of using perception checks and investigation checks. And it really is a great way of distinguishing between when the members of your party are using their senses and when they're using their minds. Another nice thing about this system is the fact that sometimes DMs, let's be honest, make things more complicated than they need to be. We put together certain puzzles and clues and traps and sequences that we think are going to be challenging yet very possible for the party and give them something fun to do. But we soon find out that what we thought would be a fun puzzle for them to try to solve is actually a frustrating obstacle. And pretty soon it becomes clear to us that the players aren't having too much fun anymore. In those cases, when the players are stumped, the DM can call for an investigation check allowing the characters to deduce their way out of a sticky situation. Now, sometimes DMs will do this anyway or something similar to it using a simple intelligence check. But this type of thing is exactly what investigation checks are designed for. And not only that, a player might have proficiency in an investigation check, which makes that a better option for them than simply an intelligence check. So, when it comes to perception checks and investigation checks, the rules as written, the rules as intended, are really the best way to go. Now, for some of you, I understand this might mean needing to unlearn some of what you have learned over many years. Just remember, if you get confused, remember Sherlock Holmes. When the party is searching for clues, whether up close or far away, and they're using any of their senses, any of them, call for a perception check. But when they have those clues in hand and they're now using their minds to try to connect the dots and draw conclusions and make deductions about what those clues mean, in those cases, call for an investigation check. If you run your game with all of this in mind, your players are going to have a blast finding clues, solving puzzles, and getting out of sticky situations. I hope you found this helpful. Please like, share, follow, ring the bell, and all that. And until next time, an ounce of perception, a pound of obscure.